Hello and welcome to 2.2 of our trig component for college algebra, calculators and trigonometric functions of acute angles. So we're going to convert between decimal degrees and what's called degrees, minutes, seconds, probably something new that you haven't seen before. We're going to use calculators to approximate trigonometric functions, and we're also going to use calculators to use inverse trig to find angles. So first, let's talk about degrees, minutes, and seconds. Degrees, minutes, and seconds is a different way to talk about degrees instead of degrees with a decimal point. So one thing to note is 60 seconds are in 1 minute. 60 minutes is 1 full degree. It's often used when we talk about like latitudinal and longitudinal because it can be more precise. So, for example, this would be read as 13 degrees, 24 minutes, 15 seconds. So when I go to add, I would add like terms. So 48 degrees and 72 degrees get combined. So that'd be 120 degrees. And then I would add the minutes separately. So 49 minutes plus 26 minutes gives me 75 minutes. However, we only consider it when it's less than 60. So I'm actually going to do 75 minus 60, and that turns into 15. So where does that 60 go? That 60 gets converted into a degree. So 75 minutes is the exact same thing as 1 degree and 15 minutes as that kind of remainder. And this 1 gets added to the 120. So I end up with 121 degrees and 15 minutes. Subtracting wise, I would try to subtract like terms, but this one doesn't have any minutes. So I have to borrow and convert this into 89 degrees and 60 minutes, which those are equivalent expressions. And then again, you just do like terms. So 89 minus 24 gives us 65 degrees. And then 60 minus 14 gives us 46 minutes. Okay. Now, converting between the two is just a matter of multiplying or dividing. So I'm going from degrees to degrees minutes. I take the decimal value, include it in the decimal, and multiply it by 60. When I'm going from degrees minutes to degrees, I take whatever has the minutes and I divide it by 60, and I put that decimal on the end. So using our calculator, make sure you are in degree mode. So make sure up here it says degree. You can always change it by going mode and converting it into a degree right there. Okay. So most of the features are second app. So if I go the second key in apps, you see that in blue the word angle is written. That's how we get here. So that way you can find the degrees and the minutes section. So for example, I can also see this DMS button. This DMS button converts to DMS. So if I type 73.52, I go second angle, I do 4, convert it to degrees, minutes, seconds. It'll tell me that's actually 73 degrees, 31 minutes, and 12 seconds. Otherwise, if I were to do it by hand, I would do 0.52 times 60, as we said earlier. And that gives us 31.2. So that'd be 31.2 minutes. And then I would take 0.2 and times that by 60. So 0.2 times 60 gives us 12. So that's where we get the 12 minutes. So we actually get the same answer either way. Now, you will notice that if I go second apps, I don't have a seconds in there, the 2 dashes. That is actually alpha plus, gives us the minutes there. Nice thing is it actually works the other way. So for example, if I type 42 degrees 18 and 18 minutes. Hit enter, it'll actually tell me 42.3 degrees there. Okay. So remember that sine, cosine, and tangent all have buttons on the calculator. So sine, cosine, tangent are all right there. The other three trigonometric features, secant, cosecant, and cotangent, do not. So we have to recognize and remember that secant is 1 over cosine, cosecant is 1 over sine, and cotangent is 1 over tangent. Also should remember that because, by definition, cosine and sine have a denominator that's bigger than the numerator, because the denominator was our hypotenuse, which is always the biggest side of a triangle, that cosine and sine can never have an absolute value bigger than 1. Tangent, however, has no restrictions. So let's take a look at some. Cosine of 37.8. Well, degrees, so let's make sure we're in degree mode. I can do cosine of 37.8 right into my calculator. And we can say, let's go 4 decimal places, so 0.7902. Okay, tangent 58.75. So 1.6479. Okay. Here we have sine squared. Well, that's the same thing as just doing whatever sine value you have and squaring that. So let's do sine of 14. And we can just square that answer. So we get 0.0585. And here we have secant. Remember that secant goes with cosine. So this is the same thing as 1 over cosine of 78. So we get 4.8097. 97. 97. One thing to notice, because cosine and sine always have a bigger denominator, they're always less than the absolute value of 1. Secant and cosecant, because they're flipped versions of that, should always be bigger than 1. Cotangent goes to tangent, so that's 1 over tangent of 20. So I get 2.7475. Okay. And here we get sine of 30 degrees 22 minutes. So we just have to type all that in as is. So sine of 30 degrees 22 minutes. So 0.5055. Important to note, if you just have degrees and you're in degree mode, you don't have to type all that stuff. But because we have the 22 minutes, you have to do it all. Inverse trig. Inverse trig is how you find a missing angle. So let's say, for example, I have cosine of theta. I want to solve for theta. Well, technically speaking, you can't just divide by cosine. You have to do cosine to the -1, and they cancel out. But anytime you do one thing to one side, you have to do it to the other. So I do cosine of -1 over here. So that's why theta equals cosine of -1 of x, or whatever's on the right side of the equal sign. This is done by a second cosine in our calculator. So here, if I want to get theta by itself, we would get theta equals tan to the -1 of 3.152. So that's second tan. So we get 72.4 degrees. Okay. Here, we could do A equals sine to the -1 of 0.3733. You get that is about 21.9 degrees. For its note, we don't have a secant button. And remember that secant is 1 over cosine. So the way this actually works is that imagine this is already over 1. I have to flip it. So this becomes cosine of theta equals 1 over 1.0768. So when I go to cosine inverse, I type that. So I get 21.8 degrees. Okay. Same thing over here. This is over 1, and I can flip it for the tangent of theta. So therefore, theta equals tan to the -1 of that whole thing. So I get about 84.4 degrees. Okay. And lastly, unit circle. So I'm solving for theta. I'm solving for an angle. I could cosine to the -1 of 1/2 both sides, or I could recognize and remember. I could remember that cosine, well, are our x values, and sine are our y values. So I could look at where the x values is exactly 1/2, like for example right here. So this has to be my angle. So theta equals 60 degrees. Remember that tangent is always the extra coordinate out here, so I look for it to be exactly 1. So you can see the tangent would be 45 degrees. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day. Have a